So welcome back to Project Management. So this is the third in the series of training videos, giving you a better understanding of how to manage your project from start to finish and what to expect along the way. You will never look at a property the same once you know this. So I'd like to start by thanking you for joining me again on another video. In this one, you'll be looking at trades and what each trade does and the order they need to be working in your property. This will give you a better understanding and make the project run smoother. So you can find me on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter and Instagram, and also watching these videos on YouTube. So we will be looking at second fix. So in this training we'll cover second fix through to painting, which are mist coat, kitchen fitting, plumbing, joinery, wall tiling, second fix electrics and pre-paint plaster check. So second fix, so this is all the work that needs to be completed once the plastering is done and before the painting is started. It is important to carry out works in the correct order to make sure the project runs smoothly and trades are not coming multiple times as things are not completed correctly. If you get trades to come out of sequence or things are not ready, this will cost you money. The correct order after plastering is, so the correct order is a mist coat, kitchen fitting, plumbing, joinery, wall tiling, second fix electrics and pre-paint check, which is generally plaster patching. So second fix, who's on next? So once the plaster is completed, and depending on how long it took to plaster and the time of year, you may need to allow some drying time before the next trades follow. If you have a quick gang and they plaster the house in a week, which is about the time that a gang would take to plaster a house in a new build, so then everywhere will be damp. If they took a few weeks, then the first rooms could have dried out quite well. It's always the chasers dry out last and the thick bits of plaster back to the brickwork. If the weather is cold and the plastering was done quick, the chances are the plaster is wet and when they're finished it will need time to dry out. So on previous jobs I've been to look at the work at the end of each day when we've had the plasterers in and left the windows open with the trickle vents open and the top sash locked in the open position on the night vent. Then through the day I've opened all the windows to let some natural air flow through the property. You'll need to let the plaster dry out naturally. You need heat and ventilation to dry out plaster. If you think about a good drying day for clothes, you need sun and wind, which is heat and ventilation. Unfortunately, you've generally not got the heat other than the natural heat through the sun, so you're relying heavily on ventilation. The plasterers will generally start boarding downstairs and work upstairs. Once fully boarded, they will start plastering upstairs, then work their way back downstairs out the front door, which means the kitchen will generally be the last thing to be plastered and will be the last to dry, which is not good if you want the kitchen fitting first. You could ask the plasterers to plaster the kitchen first, which would allow the kitchen to dry out while the rest of the house is drying. So mist coat, so to put it simply, a mist coat is a watered down coat of paint which is applied to fresh, dried, new plaster before you apply a full non-watered down coat of paint, as a new plaster is a permeable surface which will soak up any moisture from the paint quickly. So watering down your first coat as a mist coat will help the plaster to soak up the paint and create a bond between the new plaster and the new paint. For new plaster it is critical you start with a mist coat. So what if I don't do a mist coat? So really it is not an option not to do a mist coat, as the consequences can be quite disastrous without one. You are likely to have poor adhesion between the plaster and the paint, and quite often it will crack, flake, or even peel off, maybe even in sheets in some instances. This will also help in the tiled areas, as the walls need to be sealed before the tiling adhesive is applied, as the plaster will suck the moisture out of the adhesive too quickly, and this will affect the bond between the adhesive and the plaster, and generally your tiles will probably fall off or at least become loose. So make sure the painter does a mist coat by adding water to the paint. When you are pricing for the works, you must talk to the painter about a mist coat. So your mist coat. So once the plastering is dry, thoroughly dry, it's time to get some paint on the walls and ceilings. So if your plaster's still damp, you can't paint them, otherwise the paint could peel off. So this needs to be done before the second fixing starts. We're not talking about painting them to a proper finish. It's the base coat, as mentioned. It's a watered down coat of paint. So when all the second fixing is complete, the decoration will be done quicker. So you can paint properly to the areas that will be covered by radiators and sockets and switches. Those can all be painted to a relatively good finish. And then it's just a case of touching any marks up from when your plumber and your electrician come along. They're going to mark things, so it's just about touching those areas up, any marks in those areas, which is a lot easier to paint the walls and ceilings without sockets and switches on, woodwork, kitchen units and bathroom and sanitary. The mist coat allows you to see the true condition of the walls, as bare plaster always looks good, but once painted you realise all the imperfections then that need sorting. This can take a while, and if you are time critical, as you have things like carpets booked in to be fitted and have a lot of plaster to sort out, you can end up painting after carpets are down, which is never a good idea. So if you can get the mist coat done at this stage, but you need to make sure the walls are dry or the paint will not last long on the walls. Sometimes you may not be able to do a mist coat at this stage, you may not get a painter, or the walls may not be dry. So another benefit of your mist coat is, so when your woodwork starts to shrink, as it will when it dries out, and the sealant will crack, and then you'll be left with the bare plaster line around your architrave or your skirting. So if the wall is painted before the skirting architrave goes on, then you're not going to get this sort of unpainted plaster line. So obviously we mentioned before, it seals the wall tile areas, so if you're tiling straight onto bare plaster, as you mentioned, it's going to just suck all the moisture out of the tile adhesive quickly, and then you're not going to get a proper bond. So it helps to seal it. Your tiler may not want to size the walls, as they call it. So if you paint it first, and then it just helps everybody just with your mist coat. And one of the big benefits, it gets paint behind your radiators. We've got no damage to the radiator, because normally when the paint comes in, the radiators are on the wall. You've then got to unhook them, lay them down, because they're all piped up, and all this has got chance for damaging it. You might lay it on a little bit of dust, so you're going to get scratches on your radiators. There's none of that. So you get the paint done behind the radiators in an area just past where they're going to be. And then when the plumber comes along, inevitably there's going to be a couple of marks on it, maybe pencil lines or a scuff or something, and that's quite easy just to touch up with a little roller with a decorator. And then you've also got potential to cause future leaks. So if you were taking radiators off, you have a chance that the valves might just tweak a little bit and loosen, and you don't notice them. And then after a while, they get a little bit of water coming through, and a bit more, because water, it's a strange thing with water. You get leaks, but they don't come straight away. They just get worse and worse and worse. So that's a few extra benefits of a mist coat. So next, we can fit the kitchen. So when the first fix was carried out, the plumbing should have been in place. So once the plastering is completed, the kitchen can be fitted. Sometimes this is not the case, so you may need to fit pipes behind units before the units are fitted, because they would have been in the way for plastering, so sometimes you've got to put some pipes on top of the plaster. So if this is the case, then you need to program this in, or your plumber may struggle once the kitchen's fitted for him to get the pipes where they're needed. So kitchen fitter. So the kitchen needs to be fitted first, so it is important to order everything so it's delivered on time. When the kitchen is delivered, they need to be placed, all the units, in a close location to the kitchen, but not everything in the kitchen, as a kitchen fitter will need to move everything before they start if it's all placed in the kitchen, and this will slow the process down. You might be okay putting a few base units in because they're the ones that they're going to need first, but you can't put everything in that kitchen, unless it's a big kitchen of course. So you need a lot of room for the kitchen and a large number of tools that are required to fit the kitchen. Once the kitchen is fitted, then the second fix plumbing can be done. When the units are fitted, you need to check that all the sockets are in the correct place. Make sure the sockets are all either in or all out of the tile line. Do not want half and half out sockets. Also check the white goods spaces have the required sockets, and services, if it's a dishwasher or a washing machine, and are the correct size. Just run a quick tape over them and just make sure that they're all over 600 if that's what your white goods are. Sometimes your cooker might be a little bit bigger. So you may need to get the electrician back to alter before the wall tiler can start. That's if he's got his sockets not quite right. So protection. So I don't know whether you've thought about this, but throughout the project, you need to think about protecting easily damaged items, especially when the kitchen is fitted. You need to think about protection from damage, as trades will dump all their toolboxes on the worktops, sink tops, white goods, or anything they can use just to stop them bending down. You've got baths, showers, sanitaries are easily damaged, especially when trades are rushing and you have a lot of trades in the same area at the same time, which will inevitably happen as you try to make up for the delays at the beginning of the project to still achieve as little a delay to the project as possible. You can get specially made protection for everything you can think of. We have used a company called Ockwells before. The items are not cheap, but the replacement items can be dearer. So this is example 3. So when the kitchen was fitted, due to its wedge shape, we had a pinch point to the rear door. So this was one side of it. The units were fitted and they were fine, except a few sockets were hanging over the units and needed moving. But the joiner saw this and decided to hang the worktop over the units 50mm either side, which reduced the pinch point by 100mm and made the gap too small. So basically that worktop is 50mm hung over the base unit. So the joiners tried to get over the electrician's mistake. Same on the other side, which meant the gap were too small. So basically the joiner had to cut his worktop back 50mm. The electrician had to move his socket back 100mm or whatever, so everything went inside the tile line, but it wasn't done, and we ended up with this scenario that the joiner put his socket over to compensate for the electrician. Once the kitchen is fitted, the second fix plumbing can be done. The sink top can be installed, the central heating and sanitary can be fitted. This needs to be done so the joiner can then box all the pipes in. So you might get a separate joiner and a separate kitchen fitter. It might be the same person who does everything. But that's why you need your kitchen fitting doing first, so the plumber can come along and then get all his pipes in for the joiner. If you are tiling the floor to ceiling behind the sanitary, you may need to install the sanitary while packing it off the wall, the same distance as the thickness of the tiles, and then remove them and refit them after the tiling's been done. Sometimes you may not need to do this. It's always best to check with the plumber first. So in this photo we use mermaid boards instead of tiling. They probably don't work out any different in costs than tiles and labour, but we decided to fit them as this was in a HMO and they'll prevent future issues with mould, grout, etc. So this is just a little ensuite that's in a with a HMO room, and just got these plastic mermaid boards, and then you've just got a sealant down where they're joined down the internal corner, and then just along the shower tray, and then your shower screen. So you've got less areas that can get mouldy than if you were to wall tile it and you've got all the grout issues. So second fix joiner. So the joinery can be started once the second fix plumbing is completed, as there will be boxings to do around pipes that's been installed. So internal doors can be fitted so you can check if the frames are in correctly. Any slight adjustments can be made at this stage when the rest of the joinery, architraves and skirting, etc. can be done. Make sure you drill out all of the locks and latches, chopping all the face plates and keeps, so that once the painting is done, the final fix will be quicker and not as much damage will be done to the woodwork. It is important to get all the skirting and architrave fitted at this stage, as any that are not fitted will not get painted, so you will need to get the joiner back and then the decorator and then touch up these bits, which is a whole lot of hassle. So even if there are things like fireplaces to fit and you're unsure the size of the skirting needs to be either side, just get the joiner to fit an oversized piece, just cut it and pin it in place so that it can be painted and taken off and cut to fit once the fire is fitted. There may be an issue with the plaster that was cracked and fallen off at low level. No matter how big this is, a joiner can pack off the skirting and fix it in place so the plaster can come along and they can plaster it all up and it can be done. You must make sure everything is fitted, as the trades will try everything in their power to persuade you not to, and this will cost you money for getting them back. So this is an example. This is a small section of skirting board just running along the on the floorboards, as you can see along the bottom. Let me just get a laser pointer. So sort of there and there. You can see some pins. So the joiner's come along with his nail gun, pinned the skirting in place, but it's not quite driven them all home. So we've still got nails that are stuck out there and there that need punching in. Joiner's not done it for whatever reason. Painter's come along. The painter will just paint anything. So if there's a nail sticking out, a fixing, anything, he will just paint it because that's what he's there for. So you need to make sure that you've checked these, that all these pins have all been punched in, get the joiner to punch them in, and then the decorator can come along, fill everything, and it can all be nice and neat afterwards. So fixing, so it's important to have a reasonable amount of nails fixing the architraves to the door frame, as if you don't, then it will crack and the paint will become loose. So in this one, I can't really see, but we've got fixings in each of these two corners which been pinned there, but there's no fixings in the middle. And you've got fixings that are just sort of halfway down, so you have very few and far between. It sort of holds the architrave on now, but really on a piece of architrave this long, you want another fixing in the middle. So you're looking at the general rule of thumb is literally a rule of thumb. So as I got taught as a joiner, you would hold your hand out, you would spread your little finger and your thumb as far away from each other as possibly you can get them, and that is the distance that you need fixings for architrave. Obviously, bigger people are going to have a bigger span, smaller people are going to have a smaller span, but an average size is just outstretch your hand so your little fingernail and your thumbnail is as far away from each other as possible, and that's the distance that you need fixings to be, no farther away from that. If it's just slightly farther than that, then it's not going to be the end of the world. But if you're looking at sort of twice the distance, 1.5 times the distance, then you need extra fixings in there, because this will happen. So this is a door frame. So this is, imagine that you laid on the floor looking in the door opening, looking up at the top of the door. So this is the door, this is the frame, this is a door closer, and this is the architrave. So because there's a fixing somewhere there and a fixing somewhere there, especially because these screws only just go into the architrave. If these screws went all the way into the frame, this probably wouldn't have happened. But because there's no fixings in the middle, especially when you've got door closers on, because there's a lot of attention, there's a lot of stress going in these on these door closers. So there's lots pulling on this architrave. So, and all it is fastened to the architrave. So this needs some fixings, a couple more fixings in here to keep this architrave close to the or fastened to the door frame. Ideally, the screws that are fastened in this arm need to go through into the door frame as well. So they had to come back in here to refix all the architrave on this particular job. Even though it was picked up before the painter, it was picked up at joinery second fix stage, that it was a potential issue, and then this obviously happened afterwards. So details. So you're not always going to get the correct size door frame for the thickness of wall that you're going to do when you first fix. So this is fine as long as you bear in mind the following quote: if you cannot hide something, then make a feature of it. So when you think about it, you've got a wall. If you've not gone back to plaster, you've taken the door frame out, which probably fitted in the first place, it may have not. So you've got a door frame that you need to put back in that place. You are now going to make that wall thicker by plastering potentially on either side and making it thicker. You're never going to be able to get an off-the-shelf door frame that's going to fit perfectly to that. Generally, it's going to be too small. You might get something that's too big that your joiner can rip down and fit to size, but generally it's going to be something that's standard. It's going to be too thin, and then you've got to try and pack it up or pack it out. So in this photo, you've got, that's the door, that's your door frame, and then this is the architrave. So what the joiner's done here, because the door frame isn't thick and so the plaster line is there, so because we're whatever 30 millimeters, 40 millimeters too thin, so what the joiner's done is try to pack it out so it looks like a thick piece of architrave. But the trouble is, he's put these two timbers, he's put two whatever 10-15 mil lats, nailed them so they're both flush with each other, and then he's nailed the architrave so that's flush. So this is all in line. Probably doesn't look like it on the photograph, but this is all in line. What I should have done is the same distance that he stepped back here from the door frame, which you would normally do the architrave, you've got a little gap of whatever 8-9 millimeters, which is going back to the quote, if you're going to hide it, make a feature of it, which is why you make a feature and you step the architrave back. So each one of these timbers need a stepping back also. Ideally, these two timbers just wanted to be one timber to make it look a little bit better, but the correct way to do it would be to step each one of these back the same distance as that. But this needs to be done not on the hinge side. So he's done it on the right side, the hinge or the door is fitted onto the other side, and then the packing off the architrave is always on the other side, away from the rebate. Otherwise you end up with lots of rebates and it looks a little bit too much. So make sure that the door frame is fitted where the rebate is flush to the new plaster line, and at the back of the door frame, that's where you're packing up all the architrave so it all fits in the end. That's what he should have done. He should have stepped everything slightly back so the architrave would be probably somewhere around here. If it's all done right, you're probably never going to notice it. But what you're going to find out in years to come, it might be a year, 2, 3, whatever, but every time you've got a straight line crack or a straight line joint, So you've got one there in between these two timbers, you've got one there in between the timber and the architrave. That's just going to crack. So you're going to constantly have what's called the nuisance crack line. So you're always going to have an issue where you're going to have to fill it, sand it, paint it, and it's just going to crack again. It's just a nuisance crack line. So it's just one thing to bear in mind when setting out door frames and then second fixing with your joiner. Some joiners will not know this, or you do get a lot of people that are oblivious to this, but a good joiner should be looking at this. If you cannot hide something, then make a feature of it. He's tried to hide it, and you should have made a feature of it. So this one's a bit clearer, this photo. You can see that it is all in line on this one. You can see that the lat that is fitted is in line with there's two lats that is fitted is in line with each other, and that's in line with the architrave. And you can see on here there is a crack straight away. Chances are it needs another couple of fixings in there. This is probably that same door frame that I picked up in the previous slide, where it didn't have enough fixings in. It's been pinned there and pinned at this end, and it needs some more fixings in there. So the door frame should always be fitted so that the rebate is flush with the plaster line, or the plaster line that you're going to have if you're going to replaster the walls. And you make up the difference on the other side. As you can see on this one, the photo, the joiners fitted the architrave in two pieces of timber, flush, but they should all be stepped in the same distance as the architrave is normally stepped in on the door frame. Having the three timbers flush, you will always have two decoration lines that will always crack and be noticed. So it's just something to bear in mind. You're never going to get the door frame so it's perfectly fitting, but you need to pack it out. Ideally this wants to be one timber rather than two, and then the architrave is stepped back. So you cannot hide something, make a feature of it. These have tried to hide it instead of making a feature of it. So this one's second fixed joinery. So as you can see, the walls have been plastered, they've nearly dried out, there's been no miscoat done. But you can see, you can look closely, the door frames were never fitted before the plastering were done, which the joiner is always going to want to fit his door frames and door at the same time. Do not let him do this, because this is an issue that you're going to get. The door frame is going to get fitted once the plastering is done, and then chances are it's never going to fit in there perfectly. You're then going to have to do a lot of patching. You're probably going to want patching before the architrave goes on. So what is saving and helping the joiner is going to cost you money, because the door frames should be fitted before the plastering is done. I don't know if you can see through this way, but this doorway is the existing door frame, which were all damaged, and it should have been taken off at first fixed or replaced at first fixed demo stage, but were never done. So that's been plastered, or it's been boarded on the inside. You can see that it's grey. So this room's been plastered, this one's been boarded. I don't think the stairs have been plastered at this stage, but this door frame should have been fitted before any plastering were done. So this is just going back through that door we've just been looking at. This was the one with the door frame that had been left in. So these are other bedrooms that we've got issues with, where we've got no door frames have been fitted. That's another doorway going in, but no door frames have been fitted. Your plaster wants something to work to, because he doesn't know where the door's going to start and where it's going to finish. You need these door frames in before the plasterer comes in, starts boarding and starts plastering. You just need something to work to, and you get a far better job done if it's done in the right order, and this wasn't. So second fixed joinery. So this is why it's important, I mentioned earlier, to remove all your keeps. Make sure they're all chopped in, but then remove them all before the painter gets in and cover them in paint. This is a brand new door frame, a brand new keep, As you can see, the joiner's not been very good. He's made a mess of this, but he's also left the keep in place. Once it's all been painted, he's come back and he's had to jiggle it about and made a complete mess of it. That for a brand new door frame is an absolutely pathetic. This has never been a proper apprentice trained joiner that's done this. This is just somebody who says, oh, I can do joinery. Anybody can use a hammer, anybody can use a saw, same as anybody can use a paintbrush and other tools, but you can tell the difference between when a joiner's done this and when somebody who thinks he's a joiner's done it. So yeah, this is something that you need to avoid at all costs by taking out the keeps and letting the painter paint everything with them out of the way. So second fix joinery. So this is a great example of poor joinery. Another one. This is exactly the same joiner that did this as the other one. So the hinge was chopped into the door only and surface fixed into the frame. So you can see there it's chopped into the door, but then it's not chopped into the frame. It's basically just screwed to the frame. And you need both of these, the two leaves on the hinges need to be chopped into, one into the door and one into the frame, so they both sit on there. So the builder tried to tell me the door would not fit if the hinge was chopped into both door and frame. This is nonsense. I've been fitting doors since 1985. I know how a hinge works, and sometimes people try and fob you off with things which I don't know whether it makes sense in their or mine, but I know it doesn't make sense in mine. So this hinge eventually had to be, plus it were a little bit too low. The normal rule for hinges is it's 7 inch down and 9 inch up, unless you've got a fire door and then you need something in the middle as well, and you set to a bit more strict criteria. So this were a long way down, so basically a new hinge, or the hinge, could then be re-chopped in just above here correctly into the door and into the frame, and then everything was fine once it was done. But this is nonsense what these did. So wall tilers. So once the kitchen and sanitary is fitted, the wall tiling can be done. If there are floor tiles, these will need to be done before the sanitary is fitted, so we need to program that in accordingly. Kitchen wall tiles need to be fitted before the sockets are fitted. It will be a lot more difficult to tile if the sockets are in the way. There is a good chance everything will get covered in adhesive or grout. If the sockets are live, then you will need to be isolated, and they may trip out if re-energized with wet adhesive on them. So this is an example that we mentioned earlier. So this has got wall tiles, so we've got a feature wall just behind where the wash and basin is. So basically we just need to make sure that the pipework came out of the wall far enough to clear everything, all in the right place. So the wash and basin got fitted so it were all in the correct place, and then it was put to one side. The wall tiler came along and tiled everything, and then we refitted the wash and basin, and then there was a little mirror as well. So this one's a little LED mirror, so that was fitted, so we had to have a little cable just in behind there, so and then it all looks nice and neat afterwards. So this one, which you can see, so this one's sockets are not in line. So this is the kitchen that got fitted, and then you realise that only slightly something's out. So either the kitchen units are slightly out of level, running out slightly, or the sockets are. So you've got your worktops, and then your tiles sit onto worktop, so that should be okay. 2 course of tiles up, and then if you look at this one, you can just see the grout line, and then this one, the sockets just dropped slightly to cover the grout line, plus a little bit of the tile, and then looking down on this one, it drops a little bit more. So this line runs out maybe ½ an inch. I mean, chances are by the time you've got a microwave on here and things here and things there, it's not going to be seen. Doesn't look good at this stage. Most people may not notice it, but it is an issue. You can check these with get a laser level, just make sure that your sockets everything that the electrician's done, that it all lines in with a laser line. Check it at first fix stage, and then you're not going to get this issue as long as the joiner puts his units in level. But this is an issue. I mean, everything looks sort of okay, but the sockets are out of line on this one. So this is another kitchen that we've got. So this one, the sockets are have all been put in level. So you can see the three are a little bit further away on the photograph, but these are all put in line. The units, the worktops, the tiles, and the wall units are all in line. The sockets, so you've got plenty of room. You've got distances you need to keep sockets away from your cooker area, about 300 millimeters. You need to keep them away from these. So if you've got plenty of room, just chuck all your sockets here. There's no point in trying to fit a socket somewhere there and then chances are it's in or out. Make sure that at the back you've got plenty of worktop, same as this one. You've got plenty of worktop in there. So just try and stick them in the middle of areas, and then you're not going to have any issues with sockets and switches in or out of tile lines. This one's got a fridge freezer, tall fridge freezer space there. So that's what that one is. That one's the socket for the fridge freezer space. So I mentioned this to the builder and said the worktops need cutting back level with the units, and the socket needed moving, so they will need to be in the tile line, as if the tile comes now, sockets and tiles will need to be altered. The electrician was sent to alter the socket position, which was fine. Then the tiler came and tiled up to the edge of the worktop. Then the joiner came and cut back the worktop in line with the units, and now the tiles are hanging over the worktop. If the worktops were cut back before and the tiler came along, all would be fine. So you can see in this example, you've got the base unit, the worktops still hang over a little bit. The joiner did cut them back maybe 35-40 mm, which should have been cut back a little bit more. But by this time, the electrician had only moved his sockets back that far just to get inside that tile line. So there's no reason why that socket couldn't have been placed there. There's plenty of room. The cooker was way over here somewhere, so that socket could have been somewhere here, so it's not interfering with any of this. That tile should have been cut back in line, and then the wall unit is all in line, but that looked a mess, so this all had to be chopped off and redone, which obviously costs time, costs mess. Then you've got your wall that needs to be touched up, needs to be filled and painted, so it's all time that you don't want to be spending at the end of the job, because you're generally trying to catch up from all the mistakes at the beginning and the lost time at the beginning for whatever reason. So you don't want a job looking like this. So in this one, this is a shower. So this is an electric shower unit, and you can see just here you've got a tile which has been cut round something. It's probably where the cable comes through the wall. They've probably cut a little bit too much out of it. This tile needed to be replaced and cut a little bit neater around whatever with the cable or the pipe coming through the wall. I'm not all that sure which one, but you don't want to be seeing this from underneath your shower. Water can get in there, and then you're in a world of trouble when water starts penetrating behind tiles onto plasterboards and things. So the electrical second fix needs to be done after the wall tiling is completed and the adhesive is allowed to set. Otherwise the tiles will crack when the sockets are tightened. Then the power can be turned on and you will have power to sockets and lights to all areas. It can also cause problems if sockets are fitted in the kitchen before the walls are tiled. The electrician will want to do the second fix as early as possible, as soon as it's plastered. It's easier to do all the sockets in the kitchen when the units are not there, so they don't have to stretch over the units, they just can stand and it's there. Do not let the second fix be done until the correct stage, which is after the wall tiling. So pre-paint check. So when the second fix is completed, there will be some patching of plaster which is required. It is important to keep this to a minimum, as excessive patching may result in an extra cost to the project. At this stage, all works need to be checked and make sure they are finished and in working order. At some point of the project, which hopefully is round about now, you will have all the plumbing and electrical items working. As soon as they are, you need to check that everything works and there are no leaks. I always start when I'm doing my check in the kitchen at the sink unit and turn the cold tap on and check that it's coming out of the right hand tap. As there are no leaks from the waste, then I'm confident this is fine. I will put in the plug and fill the sink until the overflow is used to check for leaks. Once this is done, I empty the sink. If there is a half bowl, then repeat the process with that. Then I turn on the left hand tap and check the boiler fires up and the hot water comes out of the tap. So this is a process that I go through, a methodical process. I've got a check sheet that you can use, but this is a methodical process that I go through and check everything. You must check everything that it works. You can then go through each bathroom, ensuite, and do the same process to check everything is fine, even the bath. When you have a shower cubicle, this needs checking as well. How to check a shower cubicle once it is sealed. So this is what I do. So I go into the shower cubicle, then fully closed, and close the door to take the shower head from the holder and point towards the wall. Turn on the shower and make sure all the tiles get wet and spray it onto the cubicle door. Obviously try not to get yourself wet at the same time. You can generally do it. So once you are confident that everything is wet, and then you can turn the shower off and carefully open the door and check that the floor outside the cubicle is not wet from leaks. If you want to put a towel on the floor, you can do, as you will have wet feet. So you just go out with the cubicle then, and you can see there's going to be some water dripping off the shower cubicle door depending on how it fits. Some might open out, some might just concertina, but you just need to make sure, don't confuse any drips from you opening the door and you coming out with leaks. You'll generally be able to see any water that's coming from areas that's not being sealed correctly. This is what you're looking for. You want to find all the areas. It is possible sometimes just to do all this from the outside, so you can take the shower head off, you can sort of hook it over the top of the shower cubicle, you can close the door, and then you can point it and spray it. Obviously you need to turn it on first, but then you can spray it all over everything from outside and just check that way. I always prefer just to go inside and do it, and then you can go outside, have a look once it's all done, but it's entirely up to you. So mechanical, electrical working check. So once all the plumbing items have been checked, then go downstairs and look up at the ceilings. So this is to see if there are any damp patches, as most waste pipes will be hidden. So you can see if any leaks and any damp patches, then you know there's potential leaks up there. Then go around and check under the sink again to see if, as it can take a while before leaks can be seen, even days and weeks. So constant checking is required from this point on. So I've worked on jobs renovating buildings, and each time you go into a room, into a sink, open the sink unit, check under the sink, make sure there's no leaks. Just keep constantly doing it every time you go. It becomes second nature to you. If it's important to pick up any issues now, as it is easy to sort at this stage, like having to replaster a ceiling and replace floorboards, or even units that are blown when the tenant moves in. So plastic surgeons, I'm sure everyone's heard of a plastic surgeon, but this is not what you're thinking. So there could be a damage done to things. Even if you try to protect everything, you could get chips on worktops and baths and doors and windows, and these can be expensive to replace. There's another alternative that you can think of, and it's a plastic surgeon. So these people can save you a lot of money. They don't come cheap and probably have to pay a day rate, of maybe £400. If you consider the cost of replacing a worktop and other items, plus the delay in ordering and replacement items, then arranging to get them fitted, it could work out a lot cheaper option. It's worth finding a number of a good plastic surgeon just in case you need one. So we've used these on lots of different jobs on new builds. Get a good plastic surgeon, they'll come out and they'll make it good. Any damage to baths or worktops, in cookers, enamels, all sorts of things. Get them out. When you think about how much it's going to cost to replace everything, £400 for a day, it could cost you thousands and thousands to replace. If you've been unlucky and you've got lots of damage to different things. Even if you've got a few properties, a few projects on the go, they can still fill out. It could half a day at one, they could half a day at another one. It's going to save you money. It's worthwhile thinking about a plastic surgeon. So this is something that you may not have thought about, but no gas supply. So if you've got no gas supply, then don't worry. If you go to Google www.liveordeadcheck, call the number, and you can arrange for a visit, and somebody will come out and tell you if the supply is live or dead. Sometimes if there's no gas meter there, it may have just been turned off by the gas people externally with a key. You might have a pipe that comes into the property, so they take the cap off and they've just got a little key that they use to cap it off if you've had no gas in there for whatever reason. After a while, that then gets disconnected in the road because they don't want somebody coming along and reconnecting that. So it all depends on how long it's been dead for, but it might not be. So if you've got no gas to the property, do your live or dead check, get somebody out, they will tell you. And then depending on the location of the gas main, it may only cost you £500 for a new supply, but you have got maybe a couple of months wait once you've paid for it. So it's important to get this done as early as possible before you start the project, before you start anything. Just get your live or dead check done if you're unsure, if they've got no live gas appliances in the property when you get there. And then a couple of months down the line, you can get a new gas supply in. You can pipe everything there so it all is ready for the new gas coming into the building, and then you can fire everything up once it's fitted. But it's just something to bear in mind. It's not an issue. It just might cost you a little bit of money. So that is the end of this section. I hope you've enjoyed the training and you have learned plenty about being a project manager. If you would like to learn more, then look out for more training. Make sure you like, follow and share my content. Subscribe so you don't miss out on any future training. If you would like to learn more about managing projects and the different training packages, then please message me on one of the following. So you can find me on social media. So you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and obviously you've seen me on YouTube. So thank you for your time. Hope you've learned a little bit of something. You've learned a little bit of knowledge, and use it if you can. See you later.